Thank you for coming. Guys, come on in and take a seat. Look, this race so far has been fascinating. Okay. Really, really interesting. And even though I've covered politics for 25 years, I'm still learning a lot now that I'm in it. Not knee deep, but neck deep in it. Unfortunately, so far the news back is that it's worse than I thought. It's really, really problematic in terms of the corruption involved and also the media reaction and how in bed they are with the corporate Democrats, etc. But the campaign's going great overall, though, so I'm super psyched about that. And like I said, we're going to talk a little bit later about how we're going to win. But I wanted to basically tell you guys why I'm running, and I'll tell you one of the things that frustrate me about both the national media and overall the Democratic Party, and hence the need to run as well. Come on in, guys. Come on in. Take a seat. You can go either way. It's okay. It's okay. What the media says, and unfortunately what a lot of Democrats agree with, and what we really have to change, the dynamics that we have to change, is that, well, the Democrats are all allies. So the progressive Democrats and the establishment Democrats, they're pretty much the same thing. There's just a little bit of a difference, and that little bit of a difference is just, as Buttigieg said in the last debate, it's a purity test. Yeah. So, like, guys, what are you splitting hairs over? It's 5% difference, 2% difference, and so if someone agrees with you 98% of the time, that's good enough, right? And so you guys are all allies and colleagues. Well, that's a big, giant lie. It's just not true. In fact, the corporate Democrats, in a lot of ways, are a bigger problem to us than the Republicans are. And so now don't take that the wrong way. The Republicans are totally the bad guys, and I love fighting Republicans, and that's what I do for a living, basically. And they're all going to vote the wrong way, and they're all going to vote in the direction of their donors. We all know that. But it's a given, right? It's like saying, like, well, okay, how are we fighting in Afghanistan? How is Al-Qaeda fighting? Well, there's not much we can do about what Al-Qaeda's doing. That's the Republicans in this analogy, right? But there is something we can do about what we're doing, right? And how we're fighting. And so within the Democratic Party, even before we get to the Republicans, because, guys, remember, if the Democrats have the majority in the Senate and the House and the presidency, that's how we get change. Otherwise, it's nearly impossible. So in that scenario, the only scenario in which we can actually pass bills and change people's lives, the Republicans are pretty much irrelevant. They're in the minority, we have beat them, and we're about to pass the bills. That's the scenario we all want. That's the only relevant scenario. Otherwise, it's gridlock, right? So for people who like the status quo, which is a lot of the corporate Democrats, they actually don't mind that scenario so much because they don't want anything to fundamentally change, right? Since they don't want things to fundamentally change, they don't mind gridlock at all. But for us progressives, gridlock is the enemy of change. So we must win, we must beat the Republicans. But once we do, unfortunately, the corporate Democrats do not agree with us at all. And so the big lie from the media is, it's a shade of a difference. No, wait a minute, we want universal health care coverage. That means Medicare for all, because otherwise, you're still paying co-pays, premiums, deductibles, even if you have a public option. And if you can't afford those things, you can still get locked out. So you haven't really changed the system at all. So it's not a little difference between a public option and Medicare for all. It's a giant difference. And the difference is universal health care coverage. You either have it or you don't. So when the corporate Democrats say, well, we're against Medicare for all, but we agree, what the hell are you talking about? No, we don't. No, we don't. We don't agree at all, right? You don't want universal coverage. We do want universal coverage. So And that's what we have to explain to people. Because, like, unfortunately, the media has lied about this so thoroughly on behalf of the corporate Democrats that people keep thinking it's a slight difference. No, it's whether we have universal coverage or we don't, period. And so, come on in. In terms of Green New Deal, they say,
How
oh,
do
we're
you
all...
do that with Mitch McConnell in the Senate?
So, hold on, I'll get to questions in a second. Okay.
But he's going
guys-
for the seat before Mitch McConnell is up.
Hold on. Let me finish, okay? And then, so, in terms of Green New Deal, well, Nancy Pelosi calls it Green Dream or whatever. So she's totally against it. So, well, we're totally in favor of it. We want to build the infrastructure in this country so that it's based on renewable energy, so that we create millions of jobs, they're higher paying jobs, and we fix the environment. But Democratic leadership says, no, we don't want that. So tell me how that's a 5% difference. It's not. It's 100% difference. So, thank you.
But they don't say that. They're not saying
Hold
that.
on, we'll do question and answer. And that's, you're not remotely correct. Okay, so, and then there's the issue of the issues that we don't agree on, and I can go on and on about those, and they are plentiful. And by the way, don't get me wrong, it's not that we don't agree on any issue. Obviously, there's some social issues that we agree on, but that, I'm going to get to that next, which is also, does your attitude make a difference? Whether you go along or you're a big fighter, okay? And I know that sometimes they see someone like me who is more aggressive, and they get uncomfortable. I understand that. It seems rude or offensive, etc. when I say Republicans are monsters. Sorry, but they are. I'm telling you the truth. But it's not just to vent. It's not just to tell the truth. There's a point behind it. Because let's take two issues we agree on. Pro-choice. We're all pro-choice. Not just everybody in this room, but even what I call the corporate Democrats, the establishment Democrats. They're also pro-choice. Okay. We're all. I think almost the entire Democratic Party has stopped taking money from the NRA. So that's also good news. That's also what we agree on. But then, what is the next step? So on the issue of choice, you know, the Democrats say, okay, don't do that, we're pro-choice, they're anti-choice, and then they leave it be. Whereas I want to go in there and tell everybody, look guys, these folks are monsters and they're going to take your freedom away. They're for big government and it takes your freedom away. So when they pass the bill, or they look to pass the bill in Ohio, where if you get pregnant but it goes into your fallopian tubes and they've got to take it out, they said they take it out and you put it inside the uterus. Well, okay, A, that's not medically possible. It's not scientifically possible. B, the government is so large there and so intrusive that it's inside your fallopian tubes, right? And you don't leave that be. What you need to do is get up and give a speech saying, if you're a woman and you vote for Republicans, you're nuts. They're looking to take your freedom away, and if it accidentally happens that a zygote gets attached to your fallopian tubes, they're going to arrest you for abortion murder. That is insane. And challenge the Republicans in Congress. Yes, you can do it at the national level. You must be against this bill. If you're not against this bill, that means you're 100% against the freedom of women. You're 100% in favor of big government. And it is really tyranny. It's tyranny. And we can't have it. And also, you're 100% against science. So I challenge any Republican to come out here and tell me how you take it from the fallopian tubes and put it in the uterus. You cannot do it. So you're going to arrest every woman who ever goes through that? Not on our watch. Do you ever see any Democrat talking like that in Congress? Never, never. They got no fight in them. But if you don't fight for women, well, you're not going to get them the results that we need. So what's happened across the country? Dozens of states have started taking away choice. So they do these absurd things about, oh, well, the size of the hallway is not right, so we're going to shut down this clinic. Well, then say, hey, goddamn hypocrites, you told us we were doing overregulation for our entire lives. Now you overregulate the size of the hallway? It's an obvious lie. Why do you do it? Because you hate women. They say, oh, no, we don't hate women. Then why are you doing this to women? You're doing it exclusively to women. God damn it, you gotta fight. You gotta fight, otherwise you can't win. Because you have to create public pressure on guns. So we passed the right bill, we sent it over to the Senate. McConnell laughs. He goes, I'm not gonna do a goddamn thing. And he spikes it.
and Pelosi and leadership leaves it. Why? Why do you leave it? Why do you leave it? That's not the end of the process. That's the beginning of the process. Because if you don't beat McConnell, you can't win. So how do you beat McConnell? You create public pressure. Because the only thing McConnell cares about is, does he win re-election in Kentucky or doesn't he? He's up for re-election right now, and he's polling at 36%. We actually can beat McConnell. But in order to do that, you've got to create pressure. So he did not vote on the federal background checks. 97% of Americans want federal background checks. Over 90% of the people in Kentucky want federal background checks. Over 90% of Republicans in Kentucky want federal background checks. For God's sake, Pelosi, get out there and fight. If you do, you create public pressure. $15 minimum wage. Great job, House. You passed it. I'm not looking to pick fights you don't need to pick. Credit where credit is due. Pelosi, Hoyer, and the rest, I don't love them, but they passed $15 minimum wage. I thought it took too long, but they passed it. Who cares? Bygones be bygones. Okay, so it goes over to the Senate, and McConnell spikes it. And then they leave it. Don't leave it. Don't leave it. No, you've got to go and say, this son of a bitch is against higher wages for all Americans. It's a fact. It's a fact. You cannot argue with it. So, and last thing, guys, I can go forever, but look, the last thing is, when you do that, you then take the case to the voters of Kentucky. And if you're thinking, wait a minute, we're in Simi Valley, what does Kentucky have anything to do with it? If you don't take the case to the people of Kentucky, we cannot get federal laws. This is a federal position. We cannot get federal laws that affect all of us, okay? So in that case, you say to the people in Kentucky, do you know what Mitch McConnell's doing to you? The reason he doesn't want a federal minimum wage that's $15 is so that he can then turn around and help his corporate donors and say, hey, if you're, thinking about lowering wages in Kentucky or not raising them, you'll get to say, hey, you can move the jobs to Alabama, you can move the jobs to Mississippi. But if you have a federal minimum wage that's $15, you don't have that argument anymore. So he's purposely screwing over his own voters in Kentucky for his corporate donors. See, that's how you fight. But they have no interest in fighting. Why? Because if you talk about the corporate donors, most of the establishment Democrats take the same money. They also have corporate donors. The insurance companies, the drug companies, the oil companies, the fossil fuel companies, they all donate. So even on the issue of the NRA, they don't want to talk about the NRA giving money to McConnell because it opens the door to them taking money from other folks. That is why the Democratic establishment has done unilateral surrender on all of these issues. We can win on every one of these issues. We have a lot of the Republican voters on our side. They also hate corruption. We have the whole country on our side on federal background checks, on getting money out of politics, on so many issues. But the reason that we don't win is because we don't fight. So it makes a difference who your representative is, and it makes a giant difference what kind of Democrat that you elect. So for all of you guys out there and in this room, if you could volunteer and you could get this message to the voters in this district, it is going to make all the difference. Because what they hear is not what is real. They hear from the media that there are no differences between Democrats, when in reality, there's all the difference in the world. And so the folks in this room, if you guys help me get elected, you will put a fighter in there, you will put someone in there that explains these differences. And if someone inside the building, they cannot deny it. If I do these speeches on the floor of the House, then they've got to reckon with it. And so what I'm asking the national media right now, on social media, but it'll be much more powerful if it's inside the House, is a corporate donation to a politician. If it isn't a bribe, what is it? And no one has an answer to that. You've got to ask that question. If you ask that question, they're screwed. And the corporate donors help the Republicans more than the Democrats. They help the Republicans way more than they help the Democrats. When the Democrats take that money, they are agreeing to losing forever, because they will always get less of that money. And I do not agree. I do not agree. We're going to fight for our positions, we're going to fight for our issues, and we're going to win. Thank you. Okay, and I'm going to take questions at the end after Catherine goes through this. Thank you, guys.
Okay, thanks for being here.